All right, well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning. Welcome to our final Coffee with Candidates event. We've got a couple great candidates here from Ward 5 that we'll hear from today. Just as a quick reminder, this is our program to help get our members in the community engaged, let them hear from the candidates, have a chance to interact, and an opportunity to ask those questions. So I've got a number of scripted questions here that I've got to ask the candidates, and then we want to open it up to questions from our audience and attendees here. So please be thinking about those questions that you might have. I'd like to thank very quickly Parsec Data Management for hosting us here in the space. This is my first time here. I didn't realize what a great space this is for hosting events like this and others. So you can reach out to Joel, Mark Blanken's last name, Houseman, who was gracious enough to give us this space. I'd also like to thank our business advocacy sponsors who are listed on the placards in front of you there, who help to make our business advocacy events possible. First Interstate Bank, KLJ, we've got Becky with us today, thanks for joining. Western Security Bank, Rocky Mountain College, Phillips 66, Riverstone Health, ExxonMobil, BNSF Railway, Century 21 Hometown Brokers, Julie Seedhouse, and MSG Billings Foundation. One last note of housekeeping. You may have seen it when you came in, but if you need to use the bathroom, it's downstairs and basically just right below me. So that's where that is. Please feel free to grab an extra cup of coffee and muffin throughout the program. So with that, I think we'll get started here. We'll just go kind of back and forth here. We'll start with Mr. Rupsis and then go over to Mr. Ulvestad, and then we'll go back and forth like that, kind of like a fantasy football snake draft. So we'll start with candidate introductions. Just go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your experience, why you're running for office, what makes your ward unique, anything you'd really like to say. And just a quick reminder, we'll go with a 2-minute time limit. Jack will have that timer in the back, and we'll give you a quick 15-second warning, and then we'll cut you right on off at 2 minutes.
All right, very good.
Go ahead, Mr.
All right, well, first of all, thank you to the Chamber, Dan, and then Jack for arranging this, and Parsec again for hosting. It's important to have these conversations, and it takes a lot of effort to put them together, so thank you for getting us together today. My name is Tom Rupsis. I am self-employed. I do IT project management, software development projects here in Billings. I've been doing that for 15 years. The last time I had a real job, I was the IT director at EBMS. My wife, Kim, is also self-employed. She does marketing work for United Airlines. We have 2 sons, Thomas and Adam, a senior and sophomore at West High. Thomas is touring colleges, and Adam just got his driver's license, so lots of neat changes going on at our house right now. I've been on the Parks Board for the last 8 years, the last 3 as the chair. I've been involved in a citizens effort to put together a police advisory board, along with Chief St. John and city administration, various council members to help build a structure similar to the Parks Board to advise council on police matters for the last year. I hope that gets through the resolution process this fall. I've been an active member of the West End Task Force. I've been in the West End Rotary Club since 2005. I'm currently the president-elect, and my term as president starts in next July. Most importantly, I am a certified barbecue judge through the Kansas City Barbecue Society, so wanted to bring that up. As far as why I'm running, Billings is in a transitional state. I think we can all kind of feel that. And I think we need people on council that can understand these complex issues that we're facing, come up with solutions that work for the community, thinking strategically, positioning ourselves to capitalize on opportunities as they arise. And doing all of that while we're protecting what really makes Billings unique and special, and there are a lot of those things. So I also think we need people who can work well with others and build good relationships. I've built great relationships with people on council and throughout the city government and other community leaders. I'm looking to bring that experience to the table and help council in the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ulvestad, same question.
Yeah, my name's Dennis Ulvestad. I've been in Billings for over 60 years. I've been on many commissions here, boards and commissions. I've been on the zoning commission, and also I've been on the task force chair, West End Task Force chair, and also when we had the chickens here in town, I was the co-chair of the Animal Control Board. I like Billings. I grew up here, and just a little bit about my family. My family, back in the 60s, my uncle was the manager of the airport. My other uncle was a fire battalion chief. And the reason I run for city council is because I feel like I have the experience, been involved with these boards and commissions here. My family's been here, as I reiterated, 60 years before, and we've been here all our life. The reason I'm running for city council is because I think I can bring my experience to city council, not to educate the people or to educate the other people on the city council. And one thing I really want to do is when there is a question, if you have a no or a yes, on a ballot that's coming up, and you have my constituents coming up to me and saying, why did you vote no on that? And to get the city involved with them, what you do, you go out and engage them, engage the constituents that you have a difference of opinion for, and explain to them why you did it that way. And this way, this will get your constituent involved with you, and they can be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Thank you. All right, so we'll start with you on this one, Mr. Ulvestad. What is your long-term vision for Billings 25 years from now? How do you intend, potentially in the next 8 years, to make a positive impact on the way there?
First of all, my intention is, like I have mentioned before, get the people involved. Get the people involved not only in your zone, because we are not just for our ward, like Ward 5. We get involved with all the other wards so they can all work together. And also, as the chamber has said before, I've known many chamber people, and they, to working together. In fact, last night we had a Chamber of Commerce, of course, on buildings coming into this area, and we do need it badly. We do need it, because what will happen there, if we have the facilities and everything, we will bring the people in, and they will stay, and that will bring revenue not only for the county, Yellowstone County, and get involved more with Yellowstone County, get us in Yellowstone County involved together, the city and county together, so we can work together. And that's basically what I'm looking at, is building more within, not outside the city, but within the city, so we can bring these outsiders in from North and South Dakota and Wyoming. And I'm just looking for, that's the way we can get our revenue. And the one thing that I'm really love about the city of Billings is the Big Sky State Games. Big Sky State Games, if they can bring the people in and we can serve them well, that will do well for the city. Thank you.
Mr. Rupsis, same question.
Thank you. I've been surprised as I've had conversations with community leaders over the last 6 to 12 months. A recurring theme is that Billings doesn't have a vision. We don't know what we're working towards. And that's really hard to make progress towards something if you don't know what you're striving to. A lot of times when we start talking about vision for the future, people start thinking about roads and buildings and parks and all these physical things. Well, as you all know, as you're building a business, your vision for your business is not your office building. It's not your equipment. It's not even, the specific people you employ. It's about you as a company, your values, who you are as a people, what your position in the marketplace is. And so those are the things that I think Billings needs to define. And for me personally, if I can make an impact over the next 4 or 8 years, it would be helping us to get to that point so that every person in Billings knows what the long-term vision is. So essentially my vision for 25 years is that we're a community with a vision, right? We know who we are. We know what makes us special. We know what our values are. We know how we engage as a community. We have a council and a city government and business community and residents that work together and strive towards that vision, whatever that is, because I can't define that, right? It's a community effort. So as we define that, we'll take that, we'll break that down into goals. Every department in the city government ought to understand what our vision is and how what they're doing supports that vision, gets us closer to those things. So I know that's kind of vague and ambiguous, but like I said, over the next 4 to 8 years, if we can become a community that has a vision, I'll have felt like I made a good positive impact on council. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Rupsis, we'll start with you on this one. The Billings Chamber's policy priorities are workforce development, tax reform, and public safety. We hope to address all of them, but some may be more important than others. For you, what is your #1 priority to grow the Billings economy? And you do not have to choose from our 3 listed.
Well, the Billings Works has a state of the workforce report that comes out occasionally, and in 2020, the report pretty clearly showed that employers need and desire a more skilled workforce. That's fairly obvious as you read that report. But what's also obvious is that our workforce, or the jobs that we provide for our workforce, are heavily focused in low-paying, often surface sector jobs. So, yes, we want a more skilled workforce, but the other side of that is business development. And we have to be creating jobs that are worth being here for, that people with skills want to move to Billings, want to be a part of our community because the jobs are here. So to me, workforce and business development are two sides of the same coin. It's why 6 months ago, as I started the campaign and laying out what were most important to me, business development, economic development was right there. We have to get to the point where we're creating jobs that are helping people become productive, successful members of society, helping them become upwardly mobile, providing them enough flexibility and income to support their kids and their goals, and so that their kids will then want to come back or stay here and raise their families. So that's what I think is the most important of those 3.
Thank you. Mr. Ulvestad.
Okay. Go ahead.
Ready? Would you like me to repeat it?
You repeat it, please.
You bet. Billings Chamber's policy priorities are workforce development, tax reform, and public safety. We hope to address all of them, but some may be more important than others. For you, what is your #1 priority to grow the Billings economy?
Thank you for that question. My #1 here is public safety. The reason I believe that we need public safety is because we do not, the rate of Billings is going to grow. We are not going to have enough policemen. We are not going to have enough firemen. And if we do not look at a mill levy and see what we spend, we're in trouble. So public safety mill levy, and also, as I said, we have to work together with Big Sky Economic Development and also the Chamber of Commerce to all work together to make this work. Because what we don't want to have, we don't want to have a man down and have a fire truck go across the street and say a man down. What we need to do is work together and have an ambulance, AMR, in every station. And also, because there's some firemen that are paramedics, just EMTs, so we have to make sure that everybody is a paramedic, because if a person's life is in danger, he can do the intravenous for that. But my concern is public safety, and also getting these police and firemen, just up to date, and have them policing all the time and the firemen all the time. But public safety is my #1 concern, because when I go down to downtown, actually that's pretty, because of the DBD, Downtown Association, that is real safe downtown there. You go down there, it's dark and everything, because Montana Avenue is a great place to go down, and it's safe, and it has changed considerably since it was no fun to go down. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so this next question coming back to you, Mr. Ulvestad, kind of 2 parts here. First, do you support the 2021 public safety mill levy? Secondly, if so, what public safety outcomes are you looking for in evaluating its success? And if not, how would you address Billings' public safety concerns without a mill levy?
without a mill levy?
Correct.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't concern it without a mill levy. As I told you before, my number one priority would be public safety. And it just has to be that way, or every fireman or ambulance or downtown economic development. It just has to be, because if it's not going, like I mentioned before, if it's not going to work, it's got to work all together, and that's not only just one ward, 2, 3, 4, or 5. It's all wards, and public safety. If we did not have it, it would not work, and we will not have the service that we should. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Rupes, the same question.
Yes, I absolutely support the public safety mill levy. I do have some concerns, as I expressed to council when it was passed, about fixed mills. Every time we pass a fixed mill, it's actually because our costs outpace our revenue growth, our mill levy growth. We create future deficits. So I have some concerns about that. However, there's no end run about it. We need this levy. It needs to pass. I've been actively communicating to people, educating them on the components of the levy, the city's plans for what would be done if that levy passes, and how they expect, what outcomes they expect from that levy. So yes, I support it. It's kind of trivial to say that evaluating the success of the mill levy is if the crime rate comes down. It's not too helpful to say that. What I'd really like to see is we have two areas where our crime is, I think, accelerating most rapidly. That's in motor vehicle theft and aggravated assaults, primarily PFMA. I think we need to address both those things. The street crimes unit has been effective in the past in working on vehicle theft, and I think we can amplify that. And as far as PFMA goes, I was a bit disappointed. The levy is primarily dedicated to physical resources, human resources. I think we need to have some funding in there for programs that are specifically targeted at reducing PFMA, because more boots on the ground won't help with that particular issue. In terms of metrics, one thing that I'd really like to see reported regularly goes back to the CPSM report, and the folks that did that report said that the number one thing that they can do to impact the crime rate is this rule of 60. Our police officers are spending too much time going from case to case to case and not enough time proactively in the community. So I'd like to see that metric reported regularly. How much time are officers spending engaged in the community? By regularly, I mean like weekly. We've got to get this nailed. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next question coming back to you, Mr. Rupes. Billings has grown over the last decade and will likely see increased growth as more people seek to move to Montana. How should Billings, as the largest urban center in the state, be proactive about planning, whether it's zoning, transportation, et cetera, to ensure you're ready for this growth?
Yeah, this is an area, honestly, where I've got more questions than answers. Honestly, I think I've got a lot of learning to do here. We've got a lot of large-scale multifamily units going up on the west end. And they're disconnected. It's hard to get transportation. They're not connected to any jobs. They're not, there's no commercial services nearby. I had a conversation with a number of people out there in one of those complexes, and they all said, we need a grocery mart. We need something here where we can get food. And the only hope on the horizon is the town pump, where you might be able to get a burrito or something. That's not exactly what we're looking for. If we're going to put so many housing complexes somewhere, we need to make sure that we're building in commercial services right and around that, dedicating that land so that as the population grows, those commercial activities will come and we can support those people in there. I'd also like to know more about annexation and how developers choose to, whether or not to annex into the city. A lot of our single family growth, especially out in the Ward 5 area, is actually happening just outside the city boundaries. Right? What is it that's driving that impact or driving that decision not to build in the city? Are we creating disincentives for developers to do that? I'm sure it's about more than just the land cost, which I'm sure is a big component, but it's more than that. I've also heard business owners say that transportation, specifically air transport in and out of Billings, is a challenge with them conducting business. Now, that might change given the last year and a half. We're doing a lot more business remotely. But I know we've had, the Chamber has supported some revenue guarantees in the past. I'd like to know more about what worked and what didn't, how those deals are structured, so that we can possibly look at those things in the future to improve air service in Billings. Like I said, I've got more questions than answers, but I think any time that you want to proactively do something, you've got to start with a base level understanding. So that's where I have to work.
Thank you. Mr. Ulvestad, Billings has grown over the last decade and will likely see increased growth as more people seek to move to Montana. How should Billings, as the largest urban center in the state, be proactive about planning, whether it's zoning, transportation, et cetera, to ensure we are ready for this growth?
Thank you. Number one, a lot of people I have talked with, the people who live out in the county, they don't pay city taxes. They do not pay city taxes at all. And they're the ones that are using our infrastructure. And that's what's wearing down our infrastructure, the wear and tear on it. Because these people coming in from like just outside the county, in these smaller towns, are coming in and using our infrastructure to get a little bit more revenue for the city. We should charge these people for using our infrastructure. Also, I wanted to mention that we do need local option sales tax. The reason I'm saying that is because people coming in from out of state and everything, they're going to pay a penny or 3 cents, as we have done on the gas tax. They're going to put in a nickel or a dime in our parking meters downtown, and they will increase, even though that's not very much money. It's $35,000 a year for revenue. But we took the parking meters out. That's just like throwing money right out the door. $35,000 here, this is for you. So what we should do is have a local option sales tax here in the city of Billings. And the city of Billings is been tremendous growth. And the way we get growth is to bring the people in. And the way to do that, as Mr. Rupsis was saying, was the airlines. And because people do travel here to San Francisco back and forth, and we need some kind of incentive.
2 minutes.
Okay. Okay.
All right, I've got a couple more questions here, but be thinking about those burning questions that you might have. We'll open it up for Q&A from the audience here shortly. Mr. Ulvestad, this one will come right back to you. The state legislature passed a law in the 2021 session which will require Billings voters to reauthorize Park District 1, an important source of parks funding in the near future. What should City Council's strategy be to fund parks, an essential amenity for town attraction in the next several years?
That's a good question. To do that, that's Park District 1, correct? We should still have the Park District 1. We need that because we want somewhere that people take care of our parks like Sierra Parks and the other parks, because when people come up here from Denver or other places, they say, well, what's in it for me? Their family. We have the trails and the parks, which we can rock, and all around. And we just have to let them know that this is the place to come because of our beautiful parks we have and the trails that we have. And especially, we do need more, getting on council, we do need more facilities down here so we can support these people that are coming in. That was just like the people coming in for Burn the Point. We had Burn the Point for them. Then if we have the the water, the swimming pools and everything, that's going to attract people. So the better facilities that you have here in Billings, Montana, that's going to attract people, and that's going to create more revenue for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rupsis, same question.
Well, Dan, as chair of the Parks Board, I'd like to thank you for this softball question. As you all know, we have a number of parks and trails projects that are backlogged. Over the past year or so, the Parks Board has been working on cataloging those projects, putting costs to them, and also looking at the maintenance and operations and maintenance costs of the department, with the idea that PD1, honestly, we were just tired of the fight. Even if the legislature hadn't done anything, we were ready to recommend to council that we put something out that supersedes PD1, builds on what PD1 offered, but then does it in a way that's supported throughout the whole community without the lingering controversy there. We presented two options to council earlier this year in March. Option number one was a mill levy for operations and maintenance, combined with a bonds for the park development, park and trail development. We've got Cottonwood, Colson, Castle Rock, Centennial, the Water Reservoir coming up, Poly Vista, and then we've got two large trails projects with the Stagecoach Trail and the Candy Creek Trail. We included all of those. Option number one was mill levy for O&M and then bonds for the development. Option number two was, what if we just did it as just one mill levy, but we took some of those mills and dedicated them to new development projects. We could do the same amount of work as in a pay-as-you-go approach, but just a little longer time frame. So either option secured funding for the next 10 or 15 years for the parks and trails. City was still recommending that we move forward and expand PD1. Obviously, that option is moot now. There was an option that we ruled out early on, which was passing a new special district based on some of the restrictions that the legislature just passed. I don't think that's feasible or the best option, but I do look forward to bringing this forward in 2022 and hopefully solving this decades-long problem for the community.
Thank you. All right, questions from the audience. Who's got the first burning question?
Thank you.
Councilwoman Gray. We have a mic this time, so I'm not going to try to paraphrase poorly your question.
Well, I don't know that you would have done that anyway. Tom, you made a comment about job creation whenever they're looking at economic growth and everything. So my question to you is, what role do you see City Council playing in job creation in that piece of economic development?
Certainly, council doesn't create jobs, and we don't actually look to the city to create jobs either. We do have programs, though, that are very successful, primarily in Big Sky Economic Development. We use that to develop our companies and businesses here in Billings. I think we can look at a concept called economic gardening, which is taking companies that are maybe 5 to 10 employees here in Billings and providing them resources, support to help them grow to 50 or 100 employees, right? Through Big Sky Economic Development, there are specific programs out there that can assist with that. And it would be a very effective return on our investment. We got Rocky Vista University coming here, and that's great. It's a home run. It's a big win. But those things are very rare. We actually will do better if we focus on growing businesses here locally and supporting our own internal growth that way, as opposed to hoping for those home runs every now and then. So that's the type of direction I would look to go in, is helping support programs that are already working, like at Big Sky Economic Development.
Thank you. That same question will go to you, Mr. Ulvestad. What role does City Council play in creating jobs?
Well, as Tom says, we don't create the jobs. We probably will just look at everything. I do think that Steve Abascal's economic development, what you want to do, you want to go in and to check what they do, because I was down at a meeting one time and they do a lot more than what you think, the Big Sky Economic Development. And on them create jobs, my dad always says, if you want a job, you go out and pound the pavement. So that's one reason. But to we have to, if getting on city council, what we have to do, like I said, we have to find something to attract these out-of-staters to Billings so we can get, and that's kind of hard sometimes to attract them, but I believe the citizens of Billings, constituents of all our wards, not just Ward 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but also get together with all the constituents of all the different wards and say, hey, what would you like to come to Billings? What would you like to see? And they can give us further ideas and further concepts so we can have a growth within the next 20, 30 years in the city of Billings.
Thank you. More questions? Yes, Annette. And this one we'll start with Mr. Ulvestad and then come to Mr. Rupsis.
First of all, thank you for running. But secondly, I'd like to say, so this is Ward 5. I live in Ward 5. I also work in Ward 1. I've worked and lived in Wards 3 and 4, and most of my friends live in Ward 2. So what I'm trying to get at is that we're very interconnected, even though there are several wards. And you've also mentioned at the beginning of this forum your personal reasons for running. So my question is, 5 months from now, one will be elected, and when time comes to make decisions in policy and vote on various matters, how will you plan to find balance between your personal wish list of what you'd like to achieve in the 4 to 8 years versus representing your ward and their needs versus representing the city and the whole vision of the city?
For me, when as I mentioned before, what you've got to do, you have to be involved with city government and city council with not just your ward, but other wards also, because we are not just ward, like I said before, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, we are all wards together into one. And if we have a problem, a difference of opinion, or a difference of a yes and no answer, like I said before, you go out to engage the person. Then someone else, if I'm get elected on Ward 1, I would engage the city councilman on Ward 2, 3, or 4, whatever it may be, and have contact with them. And that way we can get together and we can learn from each other, from each ward, to come to a solution, like I said before. And that will give us a lot more ideas and a lot more concepts.
Thank you. Mr. Rupsis?
All right, so thanks, Mehmet, for that question. The question of how do we balance our personal goals or interests, our ward needs and the city needs. And it is an interesting position because you are elected by a ward, but once you're elected, your responsibility is to the entire city. And so, yeah, there is that balance, and I imagine it will be difficult at times. What I think is most important is that council provides clear and consistent leadership for the city. If we're going to do something in one ward for whatever reason, we ought to be able to find consistency across the city in how we're applying that direction. And I think what's important there, what helps that is relationships that you build across council. I've been very fortunate as during my time on the Parks Board to build relationships with almost everybody on council. I've enjoyed all my conversations with Pam. I'm glad she's here, even though she's not even in our ward. We don't even have Mike or Sean here today. But it's important to build those relationships. We all bring our own perspectives to the table. But I think at the end of the day, we all want what's best for the city. And we as a council need to work together on those things. I've heard too much talk about council being divided or partisan or not working together on things. And I don't place any blame on that to anybody. It's just a condition that exists, and I think building those relationships will help. So my number one goal will be to expand those relationships. If I'm elected, there'll probably be several other new people on council. We'll all be getting up to speed. I'll look to those who have been around for a while for guidance, and look forward to working with them on whatever issues are brought forward.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson.
Thanks for the microphone. Where's the spotlight? So tons of people, a lot of people have said over the last few years that Billings and the state of Montana have grown apart in the way that the state funds cities, and that we have gone beyond what the system can support. So my question to you guys would be, what role do you think the city council should play in shaping or influencing the funding mechanisms for cities and Billings? And if there is one, what would you guys do?
We'll start with you, Mr. Rupsis.
All right, thanks for that question, Mike. It is important, and I've heard recently that somebody said that when things go up to Helena, if it's something Billings related, people automatically say no. That's a very frustrating situation to be in. I think it starts again with relationships. We've got to build the relationships across council so that we speak with one voice. We need to improve the relationship with our county commission so that we're working together as opposed to, and I know we do on many things, but it does come across sometimes as we're a bit at heads as we do that. And then we need to, as Billings, send a delegation to Helena that has a goal in mind, right? We need to, as a people, elect people that are going to go to Helena and fight for Billings. And once they get there, yeah, they have to work with the rest of the state, which is a hard position to be in because we pull a lot of people in from very rural areas around the state and Wyoming that are not going to be supportive of if we want to do things like a sales tax. They know that the money's going to be coming to Billings. There's no real reason for them to support that. So we have to, to me, it's all about relationship building and what can we do to start working together so we're all pulling in the same direction. And, like we're actually on the same team. We need to act that way. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ulvestad?
Yes. City council is very important is because I mentioned that, like Mr. Rufus said, we have to have everybody involved. But I made a suggestion the other night to city council. I've been at city council for 9 years, haven't missed a day. And when on their agenda, if city council has a certain agenda that they want to tackle, they choose, well, who should we tackle? Who should we have on this ad hoc committee? And I suggested, well, let's just get a constituent from one of the wards. Instead of going with their own people within the council, let's get a constituent and have them on that ad hoc committee. And as I said before, that can make them involved with city government instead of right in the city themselves, the city council people themselves. Have 5 people, have 4 off the city council, and they have 1 constituent who can work with them. And that this will change the dynamics of the concepts and ideas. You'll have a lot more ideas and a lot more concepts coming from one that isn't involved with the city. And another thing is a lot of people in the city of Billings, which I would do if on city council, is educate the people on the city charter, because that's what the city follows. Our judicial system is one branch of that city charter, and our other is the executive. Now you ask, well, what do those two do in the
15 seconds.
In the judicial? They're the ones, the council that writes it, and the executive is the city administrator. If to educate the people on the city council on those two and educate the person, they'll be more involved. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I saw we had another question from Mr. McLean.
Yeah, Tom kind of alluded to it. I was going to ask, a lot of the issues we've talked about today, development, public safety, they're not just city issues, they're city-county issues. And how do you foster a collaborative relationship with the city, with the county commissioners and work together to, have a better region or better county rather than just a better city?
Thank you. We'll start with you, Mr. Ulvestad.
I've had this question answered before, and I see the mayor's back there. The best way to get with the county commissioners and the city to get along, diplomacy, because that will get you along. And since we just have one police department, one sheriff department, and to get along to our ideas, because this happened years and years ago. They tried to get the police and the the police and the fire department has one. Excuse me, I'm sorry. The police department and the sheriff's department, has one entity, so they could go out and have more. But we have to be kinder, learn diplomacy, and especially some people don't even know what ward they live in. So they can vote. They have no idea. But I would love to educate the people on the city charter, because that's what this city is founded on.
Thank you. Mr. Rupsis?
Thanks, Tom. We had talked a bit about relationships and building that, and I think there's definitely some work there to be done with council and this county commission. We've heard some discussion in council on that in recent days or weeks about how to do that, and whether it's through formal meetings and those types of things, or just informal conversations between council members and our commissioners. Whatever that process is, it needs to happen and more frequently. But I also think there's a role here that we can play as a city. Obviously, we're 70% of the county population. And what happens in Billings affects the rest of the county. And what happens in the rest of the county affects Billings. We're very interdependent that way. So anything that we can do to support the rest of the towns in our county, in their growth and their opportunities, I think we kind of owe that to ourselves. Because if Lockwood is more successful, if Molt is more successful, or Laurel is more successful, or Broadview, that's going to come to us. That's going to benefit us as a community. So I think we need to look for opportunities to do that. And it always comes down to money. Of course it does. But if there's ways that we can support, the towns around us in our county, I think we benefit from that ultimately. And ultimately, I think that would, help improve the relationship with the county as well.
Thank you. Question from our former state senator, Marty McDonald.
I had the privilege of representing South and West Billings, some of which overlaps into Ward 5, for 12 years. And one of the things I saw that was enormously beneficial in my neighborhoods over those years was the leverage and the transformational investments of the tax increment financing districts. And I was wondering where you stand on that. It's always a struggle. I don't think council appreciates what a tool that is to benefit particularly some of our neighborhoods that really could use some investment. Mm-hmm. And so I'd be interested in your stance on that.
Thank you. We'll start with you, Mr. Rupsis.
Yeah, certainly. I like the TIF districts. It's easy to see the impact that the districts have had in the South Billings Boulevard area. That's very visible, very in your face, right? It's a little harder to see downtown where, we've got all this built infrastructure already, and the types of projects that are pursued there are different. And then East Billings is a bit slower moving. So, if we could replicate the success of South Billings Boulevard and East Billings, look where we'd be in 15 years. That's amazing, and we should be looking for those opportunities. So we need to be working with the Bird and Zach and identifying what those best opportunities are. and supporting them. We only have those TIF districts for a short time in geological terms. In everyday terms, it's decades, right? And that has an impact on the city. Those are tax dollars that the city is not receiving. We expect that we as a citywide will get that benefit in 20, 30 years when those TIF districts close, and then we can get the benefits of that incremental value. But in terms of revitalizing areas, they're a great tool. I think Councilmember Neese brought one up in the east part of the Heights, and the rest of the council cheered him. Yes, do it, right? And so we should be looking at them. My only concern is, yes, that incremental stays in the district, and where would we be today if we had that 5, 7, 10, whatever $1 million it is from those 3 TIF districts coming into the coffers, the general fund, for public safety or what have you. I mean, it would be a different conversation that we'd be having. But yes, I support the districts and would encourage them anywhere in the city where we need them.
Thank you. Mr. Ulvestad?
Yes, I also support the TIF, which is tax increment finance. The reason I support this is because it does help, especially in your downtown area, also in your Eberg area. But you have to be very careful about the TIF on First Avenue South on the Crane Building. Very, very careful on that, because they have blight, and what they're using the TIF money to get rid of the blight. Now we have to have a discussion what's the difference between what your definition of blight and my definition of blight. Because what's happened down there, because I observe all over the city, down there at the Crane Building, right next door, you have, you have your camp for your homeless and everything, which that has turned into. But the police have been a pretty good job of clearing that out down there by the Crane Building. But I would, on blight, yes. All right, blight we have to look at. And also on these TIF districts. I would love to have a TIF district in my neighborhood. That way everything stays right there. I would love to, but TIF districts, they do work, and it is a good investment for the city.
Thank you. Next question, Mr. Steve Simonson.
Thank you, Dan. My question for the candidates is, there's a number of groups that are working on workforce housing right now in the community. What role do you see the city playing in that particular field?
Start with you, Mr. Ulvestad.
I agree with that. That's called community housing development, and it's very, very good, and it does create neighborhoods for you. And I see my role in it as Billings grows further and further and further. We do need to build west, of course, but I like the businesses that are doing the community housing, because we can't build south into the Yellowstone River, north into the rims, but our is west. That is where the traffic's going to go, and that is where Billings is going to go. And on this community development, I believe it's on the 4th floor of the Miller Building. She does a good job in getting low-income people into these development housings, and I absolutely support that.
Thank you, Mr. Rupsis.
Thanks for that question. I just had a conversation with Zach Terakidis from the eBird about this very topic last week. He was throwing out a lot of interesting ideas, creative ideas about how to build workforce housing specifically in that East Billings area. He actually had some concerns about the Stillwater building, and maybe that could be used better as a residential facility than a city hall. And the point isn't necessarily that, but the point is we have to think creatively about our housing options here in Billings. As far as city council, what we can do to support, I think, ties into the last conversation about TIF districts. I think that's an opportunity, especially there in East Billings. If we look to take some of that real estate that is, lower priced than, 10 blocks west, and look at those options. How do we build communities and as residential and services in those areas that are sitting underutilized today? So I think there are opportunities there. I'm interested in hearing all kinds of creative solutions from people throughout the community on ways to do that. I think TIF is certainly an area, and it kind of goes back to some of the other things I was saying about having more questions than answers. I want to understand a lot more about how developers choose, specific locations and why, say, Mike Stock chose to build his next 720 apartments out there on the west end as opposed to looking at something downtown. I know people were trying to encourage that, but it didn't fly for whatever reason. So I have a lot to learn in that area.
Thank you. So another question from the back over there.
Good leadership in many ways relies on barometers, and whether you would encourage having that kind of information flow from you from the jail, from law enforcement. Spent the last 17, 18 years working with law enforcement. I spent 27 years in the military as a communications sergeant on a special forces team. So incorporating people into that to have good leadership is an important thing. And the other thing is, I got to ask Tom this question the other day. Do you know where the term tax comes from?
Go ahead and format the full question, and we'll give them 2 minutes to
Okay.
respond to the full thing.
Because most politicians that I found don't understand that where the term tax comes from, and it's an important thing. With the mill levy, which is just to me another fancy word for tax, comes to the point where with the increased value of houses that are going up in Billings especially, when you call for a mill levy that's a particular rate, I don't know that people necessarily understand how much of an increase that's going to cause just due to the fact that the housing prices in Billings have gone up.
Mr. Rupsis, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you, and it's nice to see you again. And thanks
So
for.
the question is, as a candidate, are you going to encourage having local barometers or information sources other than the official stuff? I found through my military career and working within law enforcement that sometimes things get filtered that is necessary data. And if you're a number person, which I believe Tom is, then you would understand that the numbers can be skewed one way or the other. And that's the thing that I find the most troublesome is just due to the fact that there's so much information out there that we're bombarding people with all the time, that we don't have a clear understanding sometimes of exactly what we're voting for or who we're voting for.
All right, well, thanks for the question. I think to sort of summarize for the both of you, are we using some perhaps KPIs, key performance indicators, and helping you to make your judgments and decisions. And I think a second part of that question, how do you intend to communicate clearly with the general public?
Yeah, and thanks for the question and for joining us this morning. You referenced I am a data guy. I am. I like numbers. I like data. In fact, if I hadn't decided to run for council, probably one of the things that I was looking at to do was to set up something I was kind of internally referring to as an open data initiative, working with city departments to basically publish public data for analysis, independent analysis by geeks like me that like to do that kind of thing. I actually even have an idea that we could incorporate that into internship programs at Rocky and MSUB, where students there can be paired with tech mentors throughout the community and build dashboards and those types of things to help the community understand really what's going on. We have now a crime data mapping tool, but it exposes very little information. All it says is this was the offense or arrest charge, it happened here. And it's almost useless. There's nothing you can really do with it other than say, oh, well, that's a pretty graph. I want the data. I want to be able to now look at it, analyze it, look for trends. What's happening in this particular community, in this neighborhood on the West End? What's happening here downtown? Because those things require different responses from police and community organizations, businesses working together to address those issues. So yeah, I'm all for exposing as much data as we can. In terms of building KPIs, there aren't many people on council that would be qualified to do that, although I could certainly give my shot at it and probably be fine, but it's not a role of council to do that. But I would encourage the city to be more open with the data that we do collect. It's public data, and it's information that we need to share.
Thank you. Mr. Ulvestad, same question.
Yes, first of all, what was your name, sir?
Dale Sinclair,
Dale Sinclair. I'm a Vietnam veteran.
thank you for your service, sir.
You too. I'm a Vietnam veteran, and to get collaboration with your men or to leaders, you do what they do. Like, you know, first lieutenant, second lieutenant, or sergeant. You know, if they work with you, then you're in. If not, you're out. You know that. And many times when I was over there, you did have to push your crew, your squad, to get together, to make them work together. And in the long run, overall, they will do what you say. And of course, you know this, we call this camaraderie. You know, when I came home from Vietnam, I wasn't treated very well. But you be nice to everyone, diplomacy, and to make people work together. And as I said many times, I don't want to be redundant here. If you can be not part of the problem, you can be part of the solution, because that does work. And we right here in the United States of America have one of the best.
Well, I moved to Afghanistan.
Okay. Yeah, so, and I've been here all my life, so I know what it's like, but to get to, like Mr. Rupsis said, camaraderie and doing the figures and everything, you learn that, and you learn that on the field. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're coming down to the end of our hour here in the program. I want to give one final opportunity. We'll start with you, Mr. Ulvestad. Go ahead and close with your final remarks, make the case for your candidacy, and the Ward 5 residents vote.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for Chamber of Commerce for having this meeting here. I grew up in Billings here. I'm a West High graduate. Also, I'm 2 years Dawson Community College. Also, I was in Dawson Community College. I was for the state of Montana. If some of your older people remember the DECA education distributive clubs, I was vice president of all colleges of the state of Montana for that club. Also, as I move here back to Billings, I've been everywhere in the world, but Billings, Montana just drew me because of my city, because I do think we have a lot here to offer. Also, I have also been on the West End Task Force chair for 4 years. Very good people, very good constituents. Also, I was on the zoning commission when we had, the zones we had to change. And there's a lot more in the zoning commission than what's involved. You have to figure out traffics and zoning and multifamily, how many families and who live there. And my last one, after the zoning commission, West End Task Force chair, I was also on the animal control board. I was co-chair of the animal control board. Do you remember the rabbits? Or excuse me, the chickens. The chickens in town we had. But we got through that, and that was quite an experience there on the animal control board, because on that board you have to learn about dogs and other dogs and fights and every fights, and also you have to know how to do a lot about your traffic, because traffic is involved. Because if you have a busy street or a slow street, you're going to put a trail there, because on a fast street, it's going to be very dangerous. I would sure appreciate your vote. I got over 12 years' experience in zoning boards and commissions. I'm a resident of Billings, Montana, native Montana, and I've known Margie McDonald. I've watched her for years, and I have learned quite a bit from her, and I think I would be a good candidate to run the city council because of my knowledge that I've had. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rupsis.
All right. First of all, thank you all for coming out today. Appreciate you taking the time out of your day and come to listen to us pontificate up here. We've gone through a lot of complex issues here today and really just touched the surface on a lot of them. To me, number one, this is an exciting time in Billings. We've got a lot of opportunities in front of us. And we've got a lot of different challenges facing us. We need people on council that can understand these issues, can dig into them, are not afraid to go out into the community and seek answers and admit when they don't know something, and seek out that expertise from the people that do. Take all those insights, those perspectives in, kind of form an understanding of what the community is facing, and then help with the other people on council to push solutions forward. I think that's where I'm ready and available to help council. I'm ready to do that work. I've built the relationships with different people on council, with community leaders, and just looking forward to helping Billings through this next phase. We need people who are going to do that without letting their partisan influences get in the way, right? A lot of people are very proud of their political affiliation, and that's great. I've decided in my campaign to put all that stuff to the side. And I have people ask me, Republican or Democrat, Trump guy, Biden guy, whatever. I give them all the same answer. You know what? If we can't get past that at the city level, we're not going to succeed. We need to be able to work together as a council and as a city, as a community, on the issues that we're facing without letting that extra stuff get in the way. So that's been a core piece of my campaign. It's something that I'm really enjoying, getting out and talking to people with these perspectives and collecting their inputs. I look forward to taking that to council and working with everybody else, Pam and the mayor and everybody throughout the city government and the rest of the community to make Billings just a great place. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Help me thank our candidates for coming today. Thanks everybody for joining us. I want to say a quick thanks to Parsec Data Management for hosting us here. I want to thank our business sponsors for making these events possible. And lastly, please make sure to put on your calendar, September 29th, we will have our large candidate forum with all the candidates up on stage at the Alberta Theater. Thanks everybody.
Thanks, Dan.